Hi, this is John LeBlanc from PD. I'm here to introduce to you our video of how to pack a Sabre2. You'll see Beau do a great job of this, and I hope you find it informative.
Once I've laid down the canopy and brought it in from the landing area, if I notice that I have a lot of twists in my steering lines, that is a good time to get them out. Anytime you notice that there's twists in there, might as well fix it then, because you're gonna have to fix it eventually. And the sooner you do it, the better it is for the line. So some general rule of thumbs, people do it after every third jump. They take the twists out of their steering lines, or at the end of the day, they take the twists out of their steering lines, or whenever you notice them, take the twists out of your steering lines. I just come up here to the tail of the parachute, and I wanna grab my 4 steering lines. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are my upper steering lines, essentially upper control lines. And I'm just gonna make sure that there's no twists in these 4 lines going down to the cascade, where it cascades from a single line to these 4 lines. Now that there's no twists in them, I can continue to work my way down the line, pinching the line in between my fingers. Once I get to my slider, easily just kind of pinch it on the other side of the grommet, continue working your way down the line here, just running the twists this direction. And then I'm gonna have to unstow my toggle. And I'm gonna take the twists below this guide ring here, and I'm going to let that steering line untwist as much as it can. After I've taken all the twists out of the steering line, it's as simple as restowing your brake. Make sure that this cat eye here, where you stow the top of the toggle through, is below the guide ring. I've seen that mistake before. Oops. And then pull it tight, let that go there. Restow the toggle, and then make sure that the excess is neatly stowed away. There's many different ways to stow the excess, depending on the riser or personal technique. The point of it is just that it is stowed away in a way that it is not going to interfere with you unstowing your toggles. So let's see, I wanna make sure that this side is nice and stowed away. So when I go to unstow my brakes under a canopy, I am pretty much at no risk of reaching my hands through the excess. It is stowed away, it's neatly kept back here, no chance of me reaching through it and then pulling the toggle through and creating a lock or a knot. Moving ahead with the pack job, I'm gonna do the continuity check now. So I'm taking my steering lines, I'm putting them over my first finger. I'm taking my rear riser group, and I'm putting them between my first finger and my second finger. And then I'm gonna pick up my front riser groups, put them between my second finger and my third finger, or my middle fingers. From here, I'm gonna just run the lines up the canopy, away from the rig. And here, if I notice that I've got a lot of slop, if I have a lot of kind of lines dangling around like this and it's not very tight, an easy way to fix that is just use your other hand, pull up and away, and then let that excess go towards the parachute. So I can do it again here. Get all the lines here, pulling up, trying to make them nice and tight, just pushing it this way, and then let it go. And now all that excess kind of drops into the parachute. I choose to pack over one shoulder rather than having my line groups separated like this, simply because just easier for me. If you prefer to have it over both shoulders, that's okay. Do whatever works best for you. At this point, I'm going to count out the 9 cells. This is a Sabre2, it's a 9-cell parachute. So I'm gonna turn the canopy a little bit sideways. I've got my nose here. I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Awesome. Once I've counted those 9 out, what I like to do is kind of hold the end here with my left hand, and I'm gonna take my right hand and kind of shake the canopy in a sideways motion like this. If you imagine, this is the front of the parachute, this is the back of the parachute. It's kind of like a sideways profile of the canopy. And that, I find, kind of lets the fabric lay in place. We have our A lines up here, our B lines are going here, and then our C's and D's are back here, so it kind of allows the fabric to separate a little bit. And then, at that point, I'm going to turn the parachute, put the nose in between my legs. Some people choose to do this big shake. I've never really done that myself. I just simply turn the canopy, put the nose easily between my knees, just like that. So just a little bit of it is sticking out the backside. That allows me to still have a lot of fabric up here in the front to flake. All right, so again, the Sabre2 is a 9-cell parachute, meaning that we have 5 lines on each side. So we've got my 5 A lines right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I've got my 5 B lines just below it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that fabric in between is where I want to flake. So I'm gonna stick my hand down and kind of do this flapping motion, just kind of doing this with my hand, and then it creates this nice fold here. Then something else that I like to do is if I look at this at this logo panel here, and then I follow this seam right here, to me it looks like a V. When I'm looking down, I want to run my hand straight down from the peak or the bottom of this V here, and that's going to help push some air out of the canopy as well as make this fold lay nice and flat. It's going to help us later on in the pack job as well. So once I've flaked between my A's and my B lines, I'm going to go ahead and flake between my B and my C lines. You're going to notice that I've left the slider down here, and the reason for that is it's simply a packing aid. Rather than putting it up over my shoulder and then trying to figure out where my B and my C lines are, if I leave it down here, leave it in the parachute, it's as easy as separating the front grommet and the rear grommet of the slider. Once I've separated that, I just move the slider to the side, and I instantly know where my B lines and my C lines are and where the fabric is in the middle to flake it. So I'm gonna flake that fabric right here. And again, here's another seam that runs to the line attachment points that I can run my hand straight down, push some of the air out, make the rest of the pack job a little bit easier after this. Next up, we need to flake between our C and our D lines. Sometimes it's a little challenging though, because we also have our steering lines hanging down here, and it can kind of all get jumbled up, so it's hard to identify what is what. So if you notice that happening, one way that you can easily get the steering lines out of the way and then identify your C and D lines is just like this. You're gonna follow from the slider stop, which is where the grommet touches the slider, follow this stabilizer, the white binding tape around, past this line, it's a D line, and then we're gonna continue down the stabilizer, the white binding tape, till we get to the corner of the parachute, which switches from white binding tape here to kind of a normal 0P seam. This is our first steering line. The Sabre2 has 4 steering lines, so we need to continue along this tail seam until we get to the second steering line, the third steering line, and the fourth steering line. Once we have these 4 upper steering lines, I just throw them over my wrist like that, and then it makes it a little bit easier to look inside this parachute and identify our C lines, which are these 5 right here, and our D lines, which are these 5. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and this D line, you're gonna notice, is also attached up here at the stabilizer. That's okay, it's meant to be there. That's how it's supposed to be. So once we have our 5 D lines, excuse me, just lift them up a little bit, give it a nice flake, make sure those lines are to the center, fabric's to the outside, and that's all we need to do. Now I'm gonna do the exact same thing on the right side. Get it nice and flaked out. While I do this, just wanna tell you kind of 3 things that I like about the Sabre2. Well, first off, once you deploy, it's got really nice slow openings. It's got a long snivel. It makes it really nice and a slow inflation. So it's nice smooth openings. And then on top of that, it's got a really nice kind of medium length recovery arc and dive. So I really like that. It's a little more dynamic in the flight. And then the last thing is that it's got an awesome bottom end flare. So those 3 things are like my highlights for this canopy. At this point, now that the parachute is all flaked out, I am ready to quarter the slider. What I'm gonna do with that is make sure that the slider grommets are all the way down here at the slider stops at the very, very top of the lines. Then I'm gonna take my hands between my front riser and my rear riser groups, and I'm just gonna push the fabric, quarter it out to the side. It's called quarter because you're kind of putting 1 in each quadrant, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I quartered left to right, now I'm gonna quarter front to back. As I do that, I just release the nose of the parachute from my knees. I'm gonna take my right hand here, slide it down in between the left and the right side of the parachute, pull out the slider from the nose, and I want it the width of the binding tape here, this white tape. For the Sabre2, we don't really recommend rolling the nose, tucking the nose, folding the nose, doing anything with these cells here. The only thing we recommend doing in this area is to make sure that this slider is properly presented. So when the canopy comes out of the bag and the slider catches air, it's gonna be one of the first things to catch there, and then it will control the opening. So like I said, just the width of that tape there, it's good to go. And then I'm gonna turn it back around, make sure that I haven't pulled the back part of the slider too far this direction. So again, we want it, the width of the tape looks nice. And then my last tip for slider presentation is to just take your hand, push that slider fabric as deep into the parachute as you can. So now all the fabric is deep into the canopy, as well as the slider grommets are at the slider stops and the slider is neatly corded. Next up is I'm going to reach up here and grab the tail. On all PD parachutes, the warning label is in the very center seam. It goes across it, it splits it, so it makes it easy to identify which is your center cell. So I'm gonna take this seam, I'm just gonna pinch and hold it up here. As I do that, I'm gonna gently pull the sides around, using my knee to help hold the rest of the pack job in place. And once I get to this backside, I want to pinch together, run my fingers down the seam, making sure that these seams right here line up. I'm gonna go about halfway past that. And then I'm gonna do just 2 to 3 simple folds. So I like to do one at the top, one at the bottom, a second at the top, a second at the bottom, and then this is a 170. I'm gonna do a third one at the bottom since there's a bit of fabric down there. So now that I've done that, I'm gonna hold tight with my right hand. I'm gonna apply a little bit of pressure downwards, which helps lock it in place up here by my left hand. Something that I recommend doing on pretty much all parachutes, at least I try to, is to bring the canopy as far up my shoulder as I can so I can push my hands and my arms as far down the canopy as I can, which will help get some of the air out of the parachute. So, granted, I'm still gonna have to push the air out when I lay it down on the ground. This is just gonna make it a little bit easier. So I'm just doing this gently. I'm holding the canopy against my body, kind of pushing it this way and that direction. I'm making sure there's not a lot of fabric bunched up here also at the warning label. Like I said earlier, if you have all this fabric bunched together, when it becomes unbunched, it's at a higher risk of damaging itself, I guess, by just the fabric running over fabric. It's not good, we don't want that. So if you have a lot of bunching here, this is a great opportunity to smooth it out. Make sure the canopy is nice and smooth. And then I'm gonna lay it down. To lay it down, I'm gonna come back here, I'm gonna kind of hold this with my right hand, applying a little bit of pressure downwards again. I'm gonna put my head on this side, and then I'm simply going to rest the parachute over my forearm like that. To lay down the parachute, we all know not to throw it on the ground. I'm just resting it on my right forearm here. Just gonna gently set it down. Before I get down on the ground and start putting this thing in the bag, this is a perfect time to cock the pilot chute. So just gently stand on the bag, pull it, make sure that this pilot chute will grab air. Looks good to go. All right, to get the air out of the canopy, there's multiple different ways to do it. This is my favorite way. It's a really good way to get the air out as well as keep the top skin of the canopy tight, which again, that will help with bagging the canopy. The tighter this all is, the tighter the cocoon is, the easier it's gonna be to control it when we try and put it in the bag. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my knees, put them right on the slider grommets, which are right here. Make sure those grommets are laying flat so it doesn't stab you too much. Knees just go together like that, right there. And then I'm gonna take my forearm, I'm gonna lay it just in front of my knees. I'm gonna push up about 6 to 8 inches. I'm gonna take my other hand, slide it this direction, and then try and kind of lock off that fabric to hold it in place. And then I'm gonna repeat the exact same thing on the left side and just work my way up the canopy 6 to 8 inches at a time, getting the fabric tucked under as well as keeping it under control. So left forearm goes down, 6 to 8 inches up, right hand here, tuck it under, push down with my left hand. Repeat on the left side. Boom, boom. We're trying to make our cocoon about the width of our bag, of our deployment bag. It can actually be a little bit wider also, which will help fill out the sides of the bag once we put it in there. So you're gonna notice at no time am I letting go of this parachute. I'm never getting off of it. I'm never giving up control of it. At all times, my knees are controlling the grommets and providing tension down here, and my hand, whether it's my left arm, my right arm, whatever it is always controlling the top and providing tension that way. So I'm just gonna keep going up the parachute here. Once I get up here, it's easy to just use a single hand, push the rest of the air out, and then I can clean it up, make it a little bit skinnier if I'd like. What I really like about this method of getting the air out of the canopy is that it keeps the top skin nice and tight. So the tighter this is, the easier it's gonna be to control everything once I do my S-folds. We recommend doing this bottom S-fold first and then the top S-fold up here. That allows you to maintain pressure through the grommets, applying tension through the parachute to keep the slider in place, and best chance at a nice opening. So I'm just going to take both my knees off, but before I do that, I'm gonna swap out the tension or the pressure with my right hand here, pushing down through the grommets and the slider, making sure it stays in place. And then now that I need both hands to do the S-fold, I don't want to just let go with my left hand. So I'm gonna take my shin and replace control with my shin. Now I've got this hand free, so I can do this bottom S-fold. I'm gonna pinch together the slider grommets. I'm going to do the first S-fold from about the top of the warning label. About right there, looks good. When you're doing these S-folds, it's good to keep in mind the kind of the dimensions that you're trying to make each fold. Ideally, we want them to fit in this bag, right? So if our dimensions are totally wonky, if this first fold is huge, then we don't have enough of the second fold to go on top of it. If this first fold is tiny, then it may fall out because it's too small and the slider's not tucked in there enough. So it's really something that kind of you have to practice with over time. Like I said, good general rule of thumb is go to about the top of that warning label here and fold it over there. Try that out. And then I want this seam to be tucked a couple inches in from this seam. That allows the slider grommets to stay nice and tucked in there, nice and in control. Okay, so my right hand's applying pressure down through the slider and through the grommets. I'm gonna take my left hand, I'm gonna crawl it under the parachute until I'm grabbing both sides, and then I'm gonna take that and fold it on top. So left hand crawls under, so I can see I've got both sides of the canopy here. Oop. Got both sides of the canopy here. I'm going to sneak my right hand out as my left hand replaces control and pressure, and then I'm gonna just fold it right back on top. And now I'm gonna sink my left hand out as my right hand takes the control. At this point, I like to straddle the parachute on either side. Some people would take their knees and put them on top. That's perfectly okay too, kind of whatever your preference is. So here, I'm always applying control. I'm always applying a bit of pressure down through the center of the canopy. That's where the slider is running. That's where the grommets are at. That's where I want some pressure at all times. But I need to clean this all up, all this extra fabric. I need to clean it up so I can put it in the bag neatly. Easy way to do that, just get the air out of it, pull this top skin out, and then tuck it all under the top skin, just like that. Then I'm gonna use my right hand to keep that in place and repeat the same thing on the left side. Cool, so that's nice. That side looks nice. Awesome. Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna lay out my bag, flap down. I'm gonna just gently kind of rock the parachute up so I can tuck that flap under the bag. And then I'm gonna pull one corner, of the bag around a corner of the canopy at a time. So I'm gonna do this right side first, pull that parachute in there, pull the bag around till it gets about a 45-degree angle with this center seam here, and I'll hold it in place. I'm going to take my left hand out while holding everything with my right hand and my right knee. And I'm gonna clean up the left side a little bit as needed. And pull the bag around just as is. Reach down, use the flap, the bottom flap on the ground, use that as some leverage. It really helps to kind of scoop the entire parachute up. And then once I've gotten there, I can double check my other side. If I need to pull on that flap a little bit, tug it in, boom. So then once it's in there, again, I'm not just letting go of things because then it can start to fall out, especially if it's not very deep in the parachute. Hold it in place, don't give it up. Hold it in place. If you need to push some air out of the canopy, now's a good time to do it and really get that canopy into that bag as much as possible. Okay, cool, so now the parachute's in the bag, I'm gonna do the line stows. So some people will choose to stand up the bag here to try and compress the canopy in there to get the rubber band to the grommet. The easier way that I find to do it is to just try and use gravity, push the bag down, making sure this rubber band gets to the grommet. What you don't want to do is to pull the rubber band all the way across the parachute and then use the leverage of the rubber band to close the bag like that. Because as you can just see, it breaks the rubber band, puts damage on the rubber band. So we want to avoid doing that as I swap out this rubber band. And now that you saw what happens when you stretch a rubber band and you use it as the leverage, I got a new rubber band on there. This is the more correct way to do it. Try and bring the rubber band as close to the grommet as you can get it. So now you're not using the leverage of the rubber band to close the bag. The flap is already closed like that. And now I'm going to stand up the bag and choke up my lines. If I have any spaghetti or any excess in the lines, this is the best time to try and choke that up towards the parachute. So just like I'm doing here, run your hand down the lines, or I guess up the lines towards the canopy, and get that excess towards the parachute, above the line stows. This is a 3 grommet bag. It's no different than a 4 grommet bag or a 2 grommet bag. If you're curious about how your deployment bag is supposed to be closed, go check the manufacturer of the deployment bag. Normally it's a rig manufacturer, but there are some aftermarket bags. Get with that manufacturer to figure out the closing sequence. This 3 grommet bag goes middle, then left, then right, or you could do middle, right, left, either way. So now I'm gonna make my first line stow. I'm gonna make it about 1.5 to 2.5 inches, and then I'm going to double stow it. By double stow, I mean double wrap the band around the stow, so it's really encompassing all the lines, holding them nice and tight, and holding this flap totally closed to the rest of the bag. All right, now that this flap's closed, I can just tuck some of the fabric in a little bit as needed, nice and easy. This flap is really easy to get to this rubber band. I'm gonna pull that up, hold it out there, hold it in place. I'm going to create the second stow about 1.5 inches to 2 inches, going around my thumb twice, just like that, to make a nice double stow. Now, I'm gonna do it on the right side. Just like that. Come up here, bring those lines neatly across the bag, create that stow about 1.5 to 2.5 inches, bam. Make sure when you make the stows that you want all the lines, including the very inner lines, to be securely within the stow. Depending on the lines, depending on your technique or anything like that, sometimes you may notice that these inner lines are actually like barely in the stow, and then it's pretty easy for them to fall out. So we want that stow. I like to just kind of stick my fingers through them like that. That just kind of ensures that all the lines, the inside lines, the outside lines, all the lines are securely in that stow. So it's kind of a little check for you. Okay, so at this point, we're gonna continue with the rest of the line stows, which I am also going to double stow. So I like to provide a little bit of tension from the last stow I just made. So you can see here with my right hand, as I take my left hand and I make the stow across the bag, I'm trying to lay these lines across the bag flat and neatly. That way when I make the next stow, hopefully it'll minimize the amount of loose strings I've got. So there's that stow. Again, I can stick my finger through the middle, nice and easy. Gonna provide a little bit of tension with my left hand, lay the lines across the bag, nice and neat, and then make the stow with my right. Boom. And I'm gonna continue this, working my way up towards the container, towards the risers, until I have about 12 to 24 inches of excess left. So here, I've got a little bit more to go. Let's see, so if I do one more, that's about, sometimes I like to do it just to see, you know, that's about probably 14 inches right there. Looks really nice, it's gonna go in the container neatly. Remember your pack job, how neat the pack job is can definitely affect how it fits in the bag, which then affects how the container closes. So, once you've gotten to this point, you're ready to go close up the container, go on a fun jump, hopefully it's a good one, and as Nick Roulette used to say, there's more to a good pack job than a finished one. Thanks for watching, guys.